HDR, or High Dynamic Range video, is commonly used to describe display devices capable of a larger range of stops of brightness and increased saturation than most current displays. This can provide much more lifelike lighting intensity and saturation, as well as expanding the contrast available in the scene. As an example, SDR monitors may have a peak luminance level of 100 nits, but HDR displays can have peak luminance levels of 500, 1000, or even up to 4000 nits. There are currently several standards for HDR. Dolby Vision, Hybrid Log Gamma, and HDR10 Plus are the most common. Dolby Vision uses the SMPTE 2084 PQ, or Perceptual Quantizer Electro-Optical Transfer Function, or EOTF. An EOTF describes how digital images are turned into visible light, and can be described as a gamma curve. This standard also uses colorist control metadata that maintains the program's artistic intent across multiple display devices capable of a wide range of luminance from 0 to 10,000 nits. In order to be backwards compatible with SDR displays, Dolby has developed a dual layered output option. This option accommodates a dual stream delivery method that consists of a base layer with enhancement metadata, so that an SDR monitor can display the base layer, while an HDR monitor can then apply the metadata layer to provide the HDR image. Hybrid Log Gamma was developed by the BBC and NHK as another method of encoding HDR video. HLG functions very similarly to the current broadcast standard gamma curve, starting off linearly and smoothly segueing into logarithmic encoding for highlights. This means that if you were to send an HLG signal to an SDR display, you would see most of the image in exactly the same way as it would appear on an HDR display, with only the highlights being compressed. When it comes to HDR10, there are two main variants, HDR10 and HDR10 Plus. Like Dolby Vision, HDR10 also uses the ST2084 PQ curve and has been adopted by the Blu-ray Disc Association. The main difference between HDR10 and HDR10 Plus is their use of metadata. HDR10 uses static metadata, which means that the values for the brightness are fixed and do not alter over time. To understand why this may be a problem, consider watching a film that has been graded to a maximum of 1000 nits on a consumer display that is only capable of up to 600 nits. Anything above 600 nits in the film would all be displayed as solid white, and you would lose any gradient in the highlights of the image. HDR10 Plus, however, like Dolby Vision, uses dynamic metadata to adjust these values on a frame-by-frame basis, getting the most out of the display that you're viewing it on. HDR video is graded in much the same way as SDR images would be. However, it provides much more headroom for highlights and color saturation. These monitors provide an incredible HDR experience, which is ideal for post-production workflows. To show you the basic of HDR workflow, we've got the ASUS ProArt monitor here. This monitor supports 4K UHD, HDR10 and HLG up to 1000 nits. Simon Hall from Blackmagic Design has kindly taken the time to show us how to set up an HDR workflow within DaVinci Resolve.
Hello, my name's Simon from Blackmagic Design, and what I'm going to do today is just very simply take you through how to set up using a ProArt monitor in HDR using DaVinci Resolve. So first of all, the one thing that you do need for when you're monitoring is you actually do need a capture and playback device from Blackmagic. So the monitor at the moment isn't showing me sort of the GUI output from the monitor. It's not just a full screen display. It is actually a clean video signal out of Resolve. And you will see why this is important, because when you start working in HDR, the image you see on the monitor and the image you see in the GUI interface is different. So the monitor needs to understand all the information it's being sent. So it actually needs a clean video signal. Now, I am using an Ultra Studio 4K Mini device. So we have Ultra Studio devices that connect via Thunderbolt because I'm using a Mac. For those of you who are using things like desktop PCs, you can use our DETLink cards that are PCIe cards, and they sort of do, slot into your PCIe slot, and they have HDMI and SDI outputs, as well as does the Ultra Studio. So at the moment I'm plugged into the monitor, into the box via HDMI, and then from the box, from Thunderbolt into the Mac. For working in HDR as well, you do need a device that is HDMI 2.0 because HDR uses a wider color space, and obviously it sends a lot more information to the monitor. So you do need one of these devices that supports HDMI 2.0. So what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to jump into DaVinci Resolve and show you, how to make sure the monitor's connected and then how to set up for grading HDR. Now, the first thing you need to do is just to make sure your capture and playback device is connected. Under the Resolve preferences, under your video and audio settings, you will see that it can see my Ultra Studio device. It's very easy to do. The devices come with a desktop video application that you just install, and that's for Mac, Windows and Linux systems. You just install that, and then once that's installed, DaVinci Resolve will be able to recognize an Ultra Studio or DeckLink device that's plugged into your machine. So I now know Resolve is monitoring via the Ultra Studio. The next thing I may want to do is just change the resolution. I can monitor a different timeline resolution from the one I'm using in Resolve, and this is quite a cool thing to do because what it means is you can work in an HD timeline. So for example, say you've got 4K files, you can work in an HD timeline so it doesn't put a huge strain on your graphics card, but then you can actually upscale your output to 4K. When I say upscale, it's not upscaling the HD timeline. It's looking at your original 4K material so you can actually monitor in Ultra HD as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do that. So again, if I go into my settings, you can see in my project settings in Resolve, I'm set up to be 1920 by 1080, which is fine. But under video monitoring, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to change my video monitoring to Ultra HD 2160p 23976 because that's actually the frame rate of this project. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the image scaling, and instead of using the checkbox match timeline settings, I'm going to change the output resolution from HD to customized, and I'm going to make that 3840 by 2160. So if I save that, now you can see what will happen. The ProArt will sort of flick off and flick back on again. So now the ProArt, it can use a full 4K DCI profile, but with this, we're actually monitoring in Ultra HD now, and I am working in HD on my timeline. So Resolve only has to process in HD, but I'm actually looking at an Ultra HD output. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to go in and set up Resolve so it's working in the correct HDR profile. So by default, if you click on your project settings in Resolve and go into your color management, by default, the color management is just set to DaVinci YRGB. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called DaVinci YRGB Color Managed. Now you can see we have presets in here. So I have Resolve Color Management presets. Now for DaVinci Resolve 17, I've got something called the DaVinci Wide Gamut. And this is what I'm going to use because as you can see, it says it's extremely wide gamut for log grading environments. It's suitable for SDR and HDR deliverables, and it preserves the image fidelity. So what this means is when you're working in Resolve, you're not going to lose any information. And also your controls are not going to be limited by the color space you're working in. So this will just give you free range to push and pull your color around and adjust your dynamic range as much as possible. Now the output color space is the important thing here, because the output color space is what we're actually going to view on the ProArt monitor. And in this case, we're using Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, which is the standard for sort of SDR delivery. Most things you watch will be Rec 709. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the output color space here. And I think what I'm going to do is I am going to use the profile P3 D65 ST2084 1000 nits. So the P3 D65 is the color space. I could use Rec 2020, but commonly at the moment, there's no monitor in the world that can show the full Rec 2020 profile because it's huge. So most things that you would watch in HDR at the moment are actually delivered in the P3 color space. And also the ProArt monitor can show 99% of a P3 profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use P3D65, which is the color space, the ST2084, which is, if you like, the mode of HDR. For those of you who want to get a little bit more technical, it is the EOTF, the electro-optical transfer function. If you want to get really technical about that, you can go away and have a read exactly how ST2084 works. And I'm also setting the nit level to 1000 nits because my monitor is 1000 nits. And again, most HDR mastering that you do is normally set to 1000 nits. And as you can see, I'm going to just check the box that says HDR mastering is for 1000 nits as well. So now when I hit save on this, you'll see the image on the ProArt change. And as you can see, the image on the ProArt now looks very nice. It sort of looks as it should. You know, if we take a look down here, if you look at the headlights, they're really bright. You've got a really nice sort of contrast between the headlights and the darker background. Now you can also see as well, one of the issues, what I was saying about working in HDR, the HDR monitor in Resolve, strictly speaking, is not HDR. It will give you a sort of an estimate of what the image looks like, but you can see the difference between the image in Resolve and the image on the ProArt monitor. So now what you can start to do is you start to look at your output monitor for grading. The other thing you may want to do as well, you may want to change your video scopes. So within my video scopes, I may want to go into my settings in here and change the scopes to HDR. And as you can now see, it changes the scopes to HDR, and I have a 1000 nit level there, which the headlights are set to. And now what we can do is I'm using DaVinci Resolve 17, what we can now start to do is I can actually start to grade the image. So again, if I think the headlights are too bright, I can actually start to sort of tweak the levels of this clip. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe just bring the light levels down, and as you can see, I can just sort of drop the level of the headlights down a bit. We can go in, and in the shadows I can start to pull the shadows down and have a nicer contrast ratio. So if you look at this, again, look at what the image looks like in Resolve and what the image looks like on the output monitor. So there we go. That's basically how you set DaVinci Resolve up to work with your monitor. As I said, there's lots of different profiles, there's lots of different versions of HDR, and again, you know, if you've got one of these monitors and you want to use something like HLG, so hybrid log gamma, which is a different version of HDR, you can set the monitor up to do that, and you can set DaVinci Resolve up to do that as well. So yeah, all that's left for me to say is thanks for listening. And, you know, hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can use the ProArt monitor and DaVinci Resolve to actually grade your HDR material using a proper HDR monitor. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions regarding HDR workflows or the ASUS ProArt monitors, please don't hesitate to contact the Scan Pro Video team.